recording. And with that, we can begin.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody.
I've got it in the middle of my screen. Should I just be clicking on that?
You are showing video and audio right now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. I know we're already into the new year, but Happy New Year anyway. It's good to see you all. A little housekeeping before we get started. Jeff has muted everybody, but if you should somehow become unmuted, please be courteous. Everything you say, everybody will hear. And we got into a little bit of a trouble with that last time. So please be courteous. We're going to go on with the presentation. And at the end, we'll take some questions. You can type in your questions, or possibly we'll try to take some questions through the Zoom. All right, just some news, bringing us up to date on some things that are going on. A little bit of up-to-date information on the Greenway, the Lock 2 project that Margaret's going to be talking to tonight is doing well. It's moving along. It's quieting down for the winter. It's very difficult to work with the temperatures this cold, but the contractor is going to be working indoors for a couple of months until it warms up, getting lots of things done. And projected completion time is probably early July. So stay tuned for that. Events coming up. We'll be having a March program meeting. The topic is not scheduled as yet, so watch your emails for an announcement. Despite the COVID, a few events are already scheduled. Lake Pack Block Party is scheduled for May the 21st, and Waterloo Canal Day will be a little earlier this year. It will be on June the 1st. Program meetings. With the COVID situation heating up once again, this is a total Zoom meeting. So we had two Zoom / in-person meetings, meeting at the Brookside Community Club, and those were very well received. And so we once again hope to get back to what we used to think as normal. But it seems like you folks are liking our in-person / Zoom meetings, and we're kind of liking the community club and liking the option of also tuning in online. So let us know how you feel. We would like to plan in-person events and meetings in the future, and it would be help us to know what you members would like to do. Okay. Volunteering for this upcoming season. Our programming season will be starting, and as usual, we'll be doing programming at Waterloo. And through part of the year, hopefully we'll be doing program at Lock 2 and Wharton as well. And so we're going to need more volunteers. Volunteering is fun. Our volunteer coordinator, Bobby Egan, will be calling many of you and encouraging you to join us. We have a good time, and you don't need to be an expert, a skilled interpreter of any sorts. There's lots of ways to join in and interface with the public and have a good time. So please think about joining us and becoming a volunteer. Okay. This evening, Margaret Hickey is going to speak with us about the Lock 2 project in Wharton, and she is the principal historian and preservation specialist at Connolly Hickey Historical Architects, and she is going to take us through this project, this long 15-year project from its beginning, from the point of view of the people who have made it happen. We history folks think of it as a history thing. We see the nice pictures, and we love those historic Morris Canal pictures, and especially the pictures of Wharton are well known, and we imagine recreating that, being able to walk into that picture and experience the way things were. Well, making that happen is a complicated thing. I attended one of the project meetings just yesterday and experienced firsthand how complicated such an undertaking can be. And so, Margaret, I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us all about it. Jeff, you want to bring Margaret on, please?
Yep, I will ask her to unmute. Margaret, you should be able to talk now.
And share my screen?
You should also be able to share your screen using the share screen button at the bottom.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Margaret Hickey from Connolly Hickey Historical Architects. Tom Connolly is also here in the background, just in case there's things that I can't answer and he can, because he's more of the technical person than I am in the office. So we're here to present the Lock 2 East of the Mars Canal. We are currently undergoing completing the restoration of the lock, which was a 3-phase project. And we are also about 50% complete with the restoration of the lock tender's house.
I need to turn my volume up a little bit. I need to turn.
Okay. I do want to start off with a couple of acknowledgements. This has been a multi-year project with a lot of people involved throughout the process. I think the person who gets the most kudos is actually John Manna, who is a volunteer on the behalf of the borough. And it was really his vision that started this whole project when he engaged our firm to prepare a historic site master plan for the Lock 2 East site in 2006. But I think also the support of the borough's mayors over the years and the council members, as well as John Reinhardt, who was the borough administrator for most of the until last year. Gabrielle Evangelista, who was helpful in all the bidding and all that kinds of stuff. And then the new borough administrator, who like on his first day got a $125,000 change order for, and he's is Joseph Kovalek. Funding is provided by the borough of Wharton, so planning, design, and restoration. But the majority of the funding for construction is coming from Federal Highway Administration through their transportation enhancement programs, which is administered by the New Jersey Department of Transportation, specifically local aid out of Mount Arlington. They are responsible for the restoration and rehabilitation and have also been paying for some of the archaeology work that has been going on at the site. Other funders include the New Jersey Historic Trust. They funded the planning document, the historic site master plan to begin with, as well as some of the design and contract documents, and the Morris County Historic Preservation Trust Fund, which I would say a lot of you are familiar with if you're involved with historical societies and historical groups in Morris County, and they have funded the planning documents, the design and contract documents, and also actually they're funding the contract administration during construction for the project. The current project. The project team. So the project is really divided into multiple components. So for the lock tender's house and site, our firm has taken the project lead, headed by Tom Connolly, the principal architect. Me as the preservation specialist. Our structural engineer is James Huffman. Landscape architect is John Morgan Thomas. Our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers are KSI consulting engineers, and then our civil, and he engaged an environmental engineer to deal with all the DEP requirements, Jeffrey DeRozier. For the lock and the towpath, we have McMullen consulting engineers, and they are out of Virginia, and their lead principal engineer is Doug Bond. Their project engineer is Becca Biscaduros. And they also engaged Jeffrey DeRozier for his work. And archaeology is Hunter Research, Richard Hunter, principal archaeologist, James Lee, who's really been the lead of this, project and been a great help on even for us and sort of figuring things out. And Joshua Butchko, who has really been the field guy and always so nice to see in the field. And you'll actually see pictures of Hunter's team in a lot of the pictures with the archaeology. Can't forget the people who are doing the work. So for this particular project, it's Deltec, headed by Ziggy Rabiega, who's the president and the project manager, and Robert, who's in the office. And actually, Deltec has probably somewhere between 10 and 15 people working on this project at any given time. And then the resident engineer, which is a requirement by DOT, is Mark Galperin out of Van Cleef Engineering, and then Scott Sheldon is sort of his backup. But that's sort of the dry stuff. So when we started this project, Lock 2 East, I'm not going to go too much into the history of the Mars Canal, since I'm guessing that most of you know all that. So I do want to talk a little bit about the history of Wharton, the placement of Wharton in this, and as well as Lock 2 East itself. So the greater Wharton region, which historically is rich in iron ore deposits discovered in the early 18th century. So as such, iron mining and manufacturing converged here and essentially took advantage of the natural geography and land resources. So that is the water power of the Rockaway River, the dense forest for the production of charcoal, and of course the iron deposits for mining and manufacturing. From early on, the region was also home to forges and furnaces, and with its proximity to these natural resources and the site of manufacturing operations, Wharton, Port Orem at the time, was a perfect location for to be one of 23 lift locks on the canal when it was constructed in the early 19th century. So Lock 2 East is set between Plane 4 East in Wharton and Plane 5 East, located between Wharton and Dover. Let me see, just trying to see. I'm just going to give you a little bit of some background pictures to set the scene. Port Orem was changed to the name changed to Wharton in honor of Joseph Wharton, who in 1881 bought the Port Orem furnace and helped to revive iron manufacturing through modernization, as well as he continued to operate several mines in the region. The furnace actually was converted to silk manufacturing in the early 20th century and essentially dismantled in 1932. So that's just sort of a broad background of what we're talking about with regard to where the lock is located. Currently, it's located actually in Hugh Force Park. And when constructed, it was designed to overcome an elevation change of 8 feet. The land for the lock was accumulated through several parcels between 1820 and 1830 by the Mars Canal and Banking Company. The property actually where the lock tender's house would be constructed was purchased in 1825 from David Dunham for a price of $30. So when we did the historic site master plan, we did a title research to kind of lay out how the property was acquired by the Mars Canal Banking Company, and again, how it was acquired essentially by Wharton when the canal was dismantled. Throughout much of the correspondence for the land transfers in the early 20th century, Lock 2 East was commonly known as Bird's Lock, essentially named after the longtime resident and lock tender who worked and lived at the site. What makes Bird's Lock unique is the site was tended by several generations of the Bird family, possibly as early as the 1860s until the canal's dismantling in the 1920s. The borough purchased the property in 1929. So from our preservation plan, I'm just gonna read a little bit about them because I thought they were sort of a unique part of the history. So Welch bird, who we believe was the first bird to tend the lock at Lock 2 East, came from Guinea Hollow with his family around 1860s. His son, George S. Bird, tended the lock after him, as well as another son, Stuart. And in 1908, George's son, Charles N. Bird, was also the lock tender until the canal no longer functioned. And then the Bird family continued to live on the site after the purchase in 1929. So Robert Goller, who I'm sure most of you know, prepared a wonderful background on the property, documented it in the after there was a fire, and that document has been a great read, and was a primary study guide when we prepared the drawings for the restoration of the lock tender's house. I don't think we would have been able to do what we're doing without that resource. And it was also used to make the argument with the Historic Preservation Office about the value of restoration, and that we had the resources to be able to do it effectively. So the Historic Site Master Plan, when we first came to the property, right, we have this beautiful historic scene here, and this is what we came across when we first started the work in 2006. There's this beautiful walk along the towpath. It's so picturesque, it's really beautiful, but the only thing we saw was a little bit of the lock tender's house, which was an essential ruin, and then also some of the stones from the lock visible in the grass. And I'm pretty sure I have a picture of that here. But you can see this here is that there. So again, historic picture of the lock tender's house, picture in 2006 when we came upon the lock. And that clown little thing had literally happened like a couple of weeks before we even started our project. And there was vandalism, so that there was actually more of the wall standing, but you could see this is kind of a fresh pushover by whoever did this clown. Again, more pictures of the lock tender's house when we came across it. Here is one of the iron bars, which was from the inclined planes that was used to tie the house together. And then when we actually started to really dive into the drawings, we took another look at the property and really started to dive down into the detail. So here we have the masonry ledge for where we know where the first floor level started. We have the threshold for the door and the door location, and we were able to kind of locate all the doors and windows and things like that. Area where the fireplace was, this is actually a picture from a drawing from Bob Goller's report, which we then were able to use because the basement was actually filled with all the stones. So we weren't entirely sure how wide the fireplace supports were and things like that. The other component of the project, but let me just go back. Even with this amount of information, we really had a sense that we could restore the lock tender's house. And that was actually one of the recommendations in the historic site master. Then the other component was the lock itself. And since that was completely buried, Hunter Research took the lead in investigating and doing actual dig several investigative pits to determine what was remaining of the lock. We did know a lot, or we had some suspicions that a good portion of the lock or all the lock would actually, that was tipped over when it was dismantled. So a couple of the top feet were tipped over and popped into the lock itself. And there was also a suspicion that some of the gates and some of the mechanisms may also still be there. And the archaeology really helped to prove that to be the case. They found a lot of the remnants of where they dug, right? We didn't dig everywhere. where they dug, they found evidence that we would find a lot of the mechanisms and things like that, we found the capstones, and they suspected that the wood cribbing under the lock walls would be intact. And so the plan then was to restore the lock as well. This is a field school that happened during the Historic Site Master Plan project to engage the local students in the archaeology investigation. So there was some buy-in from the borough and the local school system. So once we did the site plan restoration, then John Manna pounded the pavement and secured funding for the restoration of the lock. That was undertaken in 2 phases. And these are photographs supplied by Joe from when the lock was restored. And this is some of the work that, the cribbing and the wicket gates that were found in the excavations that Hunter did while the contractor was on site. So a picture of the lock, excavated and showing the condition of the walls. You can see where there used to be wood embedded in the lock walls to hold the sort of a wood bumper wall on the one side of the lock. There was so much evidence, so much to use to be able to restore the lock. And the timber cribbing under the lock walls was apparently in good shape. And so you can see there's water in the lock. It's to actually help preserve that material. Here's more pictures of just the work going on and stabilization measures. And they hung these things above so that they could cover things at night to protect the pointing. A lot of evidence of sort of, the evolution of the lock, things like that. Another picture, more, the stonework done. This is the east end of the lock where the canal comes in. The west end was pretty much untouched. So the scope of the work really focused on the majority of the lock walls, and then the east end and the gates. The first phase focused really just on the masonry. And then the second phase took more of the lock out of the ground, restored the capstones, restored the wood bumper, and then rebuilt the miter gate at the east end of the lock. So here it is under construction. See the massive size compared to the 2 men in the pit, and then this is it in completion. And then this is it looking from the canal. So that was phase 1 and 2 of the restoration of the lock. And then John went back and pounded more pavement and was able to get funding for our firm and Doug Bond's firm to prepare the contract documents for to complete the restoration of the lock, and also to restore the lock tender's house. And then also with those documents, was able to secure TAP funding from the Federal Highway through DOT to restore the entire, to complete the restoration. I'm gonna kind of summarize some of the things that we've had to face, or that we faced during this whole process. It was a long process, this second part. We originally wanted to finish the lock and stabilize the lock tender's house so that some archaeology could happen in the lock tender's house, and then do a separate phase to just restore the lock tender's house on its own. But DOT didn't like that. So we ended up combining the 2 projects, and that's how we're proceeding now. And the contractor, as you will see from the photographs, is working on both projects, both component projects at the same time. We had to, so this is the entire site, and I'll go over that. Let me just explain a few things first. So we had to bid the project 2 times because we didn't actually have enough money after the first time. bid the project, got the same 2 contractors. We revised the drawings to clarify some things that came out during bidding. The borough offered their services on any excavations related to installing the electrical service. And we were able to bring the project down a little bit, but the end cost right now, or the current cost, is about $3.3 million for the restoration of the lock tender's house, and also to provide barrier-free restrooms at Hugh Force Park. So one of the things we struggled with was, how are we going to fit a restroom in what is essentially a very tiny building? And so we came to the conclusion that there was actually an unused restroom facility down here at Hugh Force Park that was not barrier-free accessible. That is one of the component requirements for any federal highway transportation money. And so what we did was, we're actually adaptively reusing that facility for 2 accessible restrooms. We are actually putting an addition off the back to provide some storage for the town, and then are creating a ramp from the parking lot, which is here, down to the restroom. So when visitors arrive, they get out of the car. If they need to use the restroom, they go down here, and then they can proceed to the site. And that really freed up the lock tender's house itself for programming, which we thought was very important. The other problem was there's no utilities down at the lock tender's house: no water, no sewer, no gas, no electric. And so what we decided was that all systems at the lock tender's house would be electric, and we are bringing new service from the street to the restroom building, across the parking lot, and along the railroad bed up above the canal. So if you go back to this site plan, so this is Hugh Force Park, this is the lock. The electric goes from here all the way down here and across and into the lock tender's house. That was a big part of the project, but a really important part of the project. Otherwise, the lock tender's house would be, usable for a couple of months a year rather than year round. We also are proposing to put, and you can see these lights along the towpath. So this way programming can happen more than just during the day, which is always nice. We really like when historic sites get more use than a couple of days a month. We also had to worry about wetlands, endangered species, and open water requirements. So there was a lot of site work and project approvals from the NJDEP. We also had to make sure that our path from here to here, around the lock and to the lock tender's house, is barrier-free accessible. So we do have to make some adjustments to how the site was manipulated in order to be able to meet those requirements. And then when we were pretty much done with the design, we had to convince the New Jersey Historic Preservation Office that this was a good idea. And so they did, we had them come out, we made a site visit. They saw all the stone in the lock tender's house to show that, yes, a lot of materials are there for us to use. The lock actually had already been partially restored, so they saw that and they were convinced. So this is the site plan for the lock tender's house. You come up the towpath, all this grade will be manipulated. We're going to go over a concrete removable bridge, which is going to be, which really is there to help the borough with maintenance of the property. Our ultimate goal is to connect the lock to the basin. Whether that's going to happen or not is to be seen, but at least we are able to do that with this particular component there. So we're prepared. We bring people over the waste weir, over a little footbridge, and then up into the lock tender's house. So the next part of this, I'm going to go through sort of the sequencing of the project, sort of on a almost like a month by month progression. The work started, and some some things I'm going to talk about, and some I'm just going to show you some pretty pictures of how things have moved along. We hopefully did this in enough chronological order that you see the progression. But we begin with the wall stabilization. We were very concerned, and the archaeologist was very concerned about having to dig along the foundations with this particular piece of wall that turned out to be in worse condition than we thought. So one of the first things we had to do was go back to the Historic Preservation Office and say, oh, my bad, this is worse than we thought. Can we take it down so that we can stabilize it and then rebuild it? And they did permit that. So you will see that this wall is this here. So the contractor did have to remove material in order to be able to rebuild it. And then this wall actually turned out to be unstable even below grade. So there was more work in that regard. While they were stabilizing, they took a lot of stuff out of the lock tender's house, but you remember the stone was pretty much up to here. And now there's like a pile of stone. There was a pile of a stone over here in that last picture. All this is the material that came out of the lock tender's house. Although this came from the lock, it was just stored here between projects. Here's some archaeological digging that's going on. So this is our structural engineer here. They dug a pit right next to the foundation so that we can confirm that the masonry was actually in good shape. And it really was on 3 sides of the building, which was heartening. Is the front needed a little bit more work than we anticipated, but we always build out allowances into our projects. And so this is sort of the rough and ready, getting ready to. There's an archaeologist there, getting ready to move forward with construction. More archaeological digs. We were able to confirm the floor levels between the buildings. You know, we did our best educated guess, but we were pretty darn close. And then the front wall of what we call the kitchen wing, which is this area here, showed to be wood in the historic pictures, but historic pictures are from really far away. And so this dig actually confirmed that indeed the front wall was of wood construction. So it's always nice to confirm what your beliefs are through archaeology. Now we start to see the construction going up. The mason has his level out. They have their scaffolding going. It is a slow process. It took several months for them to rebuild the stone masonry. They had to do it in sections because they built to a certain point and then brought the floor in and then brought to another point and then they brought the floor in, and you'll see that in some of the photographs. So here we are with the construction progressing. When they took the stone out of the basement of the lock, they actually did find a what we call a rat slab. It's a cement floor, very thin. It had a mid-20th century date on it. Somebody did date it, which is interesting. We couldn't save it. I think we saved that little piece that had the date, but because it was too thin and we need to put equipment and stuff, we put in a new slab. But you can see the ledge around the perimeter of the building where the first floor framing sat. So that's always nice to have clues in the architecture on where things are supposed to go. So this is looking at the junction between the entrance into what we call the main house and the kitchen wing. Again, we have to be barrier-free accessible. We note that, you know, this is all modern construction, but this will all actually get buried. You won't actually see any of that with the juxtaposition of the historic fabric behind. More construction going on, the center beams going in, you know, multiple things going on at once, which was nice. Here is the basement with the first floor framing installed. And so there didn't need to be a lot of work when we actually took the stone out of the basement. The fireplace support was pretty much intact. They had a repoint and stuff, but most of it was there. Here's the entrance to the basement that we saw in the historic photographs in preparation of, water and things like that. We will be putting a drain outside the door. So this way we can prevent flooding and moisture infiltration in the basement. The well, which we could barely see on the ground, before we started the work, started to take shape once we did the excavations around the entrances. Here we see things starting to go up a little bit more. Right, so picture one, window barely there, picture two, window in, and we're about to hit the second floor level. More construction. You can see they're starting to put in the framing for the second floor. This photograph is interesting. When you walk in, you're going, there's no wood in this construction. I don't know why that's there, but they've installed that in order to be able to make sure that they have a level floor. And then they build the masonry up to the bottom of the up into the bottom of the wood, and then they take the cribbing out. And so they did a really nice job on framing. This is not how we frame now. This is, a lot of people don't do traditional masonry construction anymore. So this is a view of it all framed before they took the temporary shoring out. So the lock tender's house, progressing pretty nicely. Now we're going to do a little bit of focusing. They brought in a second team to start working on the lock. It's a big construction. They actually had to dismantle a good portion of the lock in order to build the supports for the concrete bridge. And they didn't get very far. You see them all standing around, looking at the hole, seeing what to do next. But the water from the basin was actually migrating into the lock, and that stopped construction. And they pondered and they thought, and they were talking about $300,000 change orders and things that were making my head spin. And all they had to do was lower the level of the basin, and it solved the problem. So that took like 2 or 3 weeks. So the lock restoration stalled a little bit. And so more of the house continued to go on. Here it is almost to the peak of the roof. Again, you can see more of the windows are taking shape. The roof line is taking shape. That pile of stone is gone. That boulder was always there. Again, more lock, a tender's house being built. From the inside, top plate getting ready for the rafters. And then this is a view where really you see the relationship now of the historic picture from the lock to the lock tender's house. We've been very lucky. We're in the middle of construction during the pandemic, where we're seeing significant delays in material supplies. But the contractor has really been able to work around that nicely. And here we have the roof going on. Again, a nice view looking up with the relationship of the wing, which is still not there. They really focused their primary focus was on the main house, and then they worked on the wing. Again, from another view. And then from the inside now with all the cribbing removed. So the windows, I know you won't see windows in this at all. They are currently being manufactured off-site in the contractor's offices in Trenton. They'll be one of the last things to be installed. We are at, I believe, 40%, 47% of overall construction. And then this is the attic. So you can see the roof is framed. Little detail on, modern framing, modern attachments to meet, current code requirements, and then the framing getting ready for the reconstructed chimney, which there will be no fire in the fireplace. It's for show. So back to the lock restoration. On this particular project component, although our office is there all the time, Doug Bond's firm is really the project manager for this component. We know some of the discussions, but we didn't actually do the design, so he knows more about the nitty gritty detail of the decision making. But I'm going to show you some pictures that shows the progress and just really how intense the construction is. So this is up from the hill. Actually, the house is over here. A good view of the lock. A lot of heavy equipment was necessary for the restoration of the lock itself. Excavations in order to be able to build the new supports for the concrete bridge. That had to make some adjustments to the wing walls. One of the components is actually to restore the drop gate as well. Again, another excavation. Also, the concrete formwork going in, the rebar, all the reinforcing formwork going up. Again, more formwork. And then that's the pour. And I believe, it's my understanding that this is one of 2 pours that is necessary. So this is the first pour, and I believe that the next pour may wait till spring. I'm not really sure. But you can see, so this is where that gate is going to, that concrete deck is going to go in, and that's removable. And then we're back to the some of the more detail oriented stuff on the inside and the outside of the lock tender's house. We did have some pictures of the fireplace. We did allow the contractor to use CMU above the basement. So this is all going to be plastered, and it makes the construction lighter, which is, generally better, particularly since we're not using it. So all the things that are visible are traditional materials. All the elements that are going to be plastered are modern materials, similar to the framing. Here are 2 pictures. So this is the more of the fireplace surround built. This is where the stair is going to go to the 2nd floor. This is looking up to the area where the stair will be. Again, sort of a broader picture of the fireplace and the room and the juxtaposition of things. View from the outside. So I think we put this picture in just to show you, CMU below where it's going to be plastered, traditional brick where it will be visible to the public. A framing of the front wall of the kitchen, which we're calling the meeting room. Overall back picture of the framed wall, the roof going in, actually the wood shingle roof is on, chimneys rebuilt, the flashings are going in. Views from the inside. This is looking at the meeting room. So this is looking at the chimney, and then this is looking towards the main house. So that's the line of the main house. Where it meets up with the meeting room. View of the shingle roof going in on the meeting room, and then the overall view of the house. And I believe Joe took this picture, I think on the 15th of January. Our site visit, our last site visit was on Thursday, but because of the icy conditions, we did not make a site visit. And as Joe mentioned, work has now moved to the shop in Trenton. They're going to build the windows and the doors. They actually have a door and window manufacturing component to their company. They're going to be, Tom's telling me our next meeting is going to be there, which would be nice. They're also going to build the shed that goes over the lock. I forget what it's called, but there's a little shed for the mechanism that, for the lock tender to pop in and out of when he's dealing with the mechanism for operating the gates. And I believe they're going to start manufacturing the components for the drop gates as well, which is a big component. Like I said, the lock itself, that's McMullen and Associates. They did the first two previous phases, so there's a nice continuity on all the projects. I think they've really pretty much worked out the gates and how they're going to operate and what they need with regard to component pieces. There was a lot there that the contractor could use as a model for the reproductions, which is quite nice. You don't often get that, so that's been a real help. So I want to thank you for allowing us to bring you up to date. Like I said, we're only at 50%, so we're not quite there yet. There's a lot of site work that needs to happen, a lot more that has to happen at the lock, and then of course all the interior finishes, air conditioning, heating, lighting, a lot still left to do. The contractor has until October 2022 to complete the project. His goal is to be complete by June or July of 2022. He doesn't necessarily want to be here in the fall. I can't blame him. And I want to thank Joe. Joe, there was a lot of pictures from Joe in our little summary there. He's out there probably more than we are. Just because we're out there every 2 weeks. We have a project meeting every 2 weeks. And like I said, there's a resident engineer that the DOT requires. So there is this sort of third party independent person really looking at what's going on and making sure that what are on our drawings are being executed by the contractor, which is nice, which is something we don't normally get. So do you think I should keep this up for questions?
I think that would be good if people do have some questions. I think,
Yes.
considering what you've done, next time Mr. McCullough builds a canal, you can give him some good advice.
Maybe. Maybe.
So yes, there are a couple of questions coming in via the text chat. First one is asking whether there will be security cameras installed, given that we've seen some history of vandalism on the site.
Yes, so we are incorporating security cameras, and the one thing the building did not have was shutters, but we are adding shutters. So this way, when the building's not being in use, we can at least protect the windows to some extent. So we recognize the possibility of vandalism and are trying to accommodate it.
Thank you. Next is, are there plans to excavate the canal past the lock?
The hope is to excavate the canal past the lock. The problem is we're in wetlands at that point, and so DEP is our biggest barrier / hurdle for that component. And DEP is the Department of Environmental Protection.
Next up was local solar considered for remote electric service as opposed to running utilities along the railroad?
No, we've got trees in the way, and the SHPO wouldn't have allowed us to put them near the. Actually, we also have the overhead wires from the electric utility. They would have cast too much of a shadow. So we did talk about it, but it didn't get very far because there was too many hindrances. But we are using high efficiency equipment that will for the electric run this utility.
Here we go. No more questions coming in. Let's see. I think that's it for the questions. I've got a quick one myself. I visited the site at past Wharton Canal days, and I noticed that one wall of the lock is stone and the other one is wood. Somebody mentioned that had to do with the widening of the canal. Was there evidence that was the case, or is that just a design feature of the locks from the beginning, that they were part wood, part stone?
No, I think you're correct that when they expanded the width of the lock, They used a little less inferior material in building the lock, and then they added the wood to the wall. And I'm not sure if that's on every lock. I think Joe would be better answering that. I'm not sure it's on every lock, but we see it in the historic pictures, and you actually see in the pictures the recesses of the wood, that where the wood was then attached. So the horizontal pieces in the masonry, and then the vertical pieces in the masonry, and then the horizontal was attached to those recesses. So it was an original design feature. Not sure what's on every lock though.
Interesting. Thank you. There's one or two more questions that came in here. One thanking Bob Goller for his help in documenting the original, asking why did they add such a big lock reservoir of poured concrete up at the, I guess, higher level?
The what, the lock?
Yeah, all that poured concrete.
Where the
After the
bridge.
gates. Why was that added?
Yeah, no, I get that. So that is for the bridge. That's my understanding. That's why I quantified my ability to answer questions about the lock, is because we didn't do that design. But I'm pretty sure that's for the bridge, and that is to facilitate the hope that in the future we'll be able to connect the lock to the basin.
And yep, so that answers the next question, is will the basin be built? And the more, answer is hopefully, if everything goes well with
Right.
DEP and all the other environmental questions around that.
Right. Yeah.
One last question here is the railroad still in service, and what railroad uses it? Is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
And that was a CNJ line, if I remember correctly, part of the high bridge.
I believe
system.
so. Yep.
A few people commenting on that it was, a miracle that that project has come together, and
We agree.
yeah,
We agree. Totally agree. And again, the kudos to the borough of Wharton and John Manna, man. They really pushed this and went and got all the money, which is the biggest thing. I mean, I want to say the first two phases of the lock were over $1 million. And if this is this is going to be 3.4 because we have a large change order for some electrical work. We're looking at a $4 to $5 million project in the end.
And one other question is, can we visit the area now with the construction going on?
You can. Sometimes the access is closed depending on what they're doing. But yes, you're allowed to walk in. We just ask that you don't walk where there is fencing up to prevent you from going into place.
That's great. One question, I think Joe would help us with this. Are there any plans afoot or in progress for other lock restorations, Waterloo, Guinea Hollow, etc.?
There are many plans for Greenway projects, but no lock situation quite as unique as this one. There are many features here that make this one doable. The quarter-mile section of water-filled canal, the remains of the lock and lock tender's house, buried and crumbling, but still there and owned by the borough of Wharton, who was amazingly receptive to doing this. Never say never.
Right.
To make
This was a unique site where a restorable lock existed along with the will to complete the project.
part of what's being accomplished here is not just a lock and a house. You could kind of think of it as the two structures, and that's the most things that you see and you talk about. But what's going to be accomplished in the end is the lock precinct will be put back fairly close to the way it was when the canal was in operation, and to recreate that and to make that happen again is a very unique thing and an amazing accomplishment. Kudos to the Borough of Wharton for sticking with this for 15 years, and to Margaret and her team and all the other engineers and skilled people who have contributed to bringing this together. It's a very usual and amazing accomplishment that will be a unique experience when it all comes together.
Indeed. Hey, here's an interesting question I've never considered is how does the water get refreshed in that quarter-mile watered section of canal?
The basin,
Basin.
the water trap between the railroad berm on the one side and the towpath berm on the other side is filled by a small stream that comes from County Concrete's quarrying operation. He's created a huge hole in the ground and captured pretty much all the groundwater that comes from that direction. But there still is a stream that goes under the railroad, the High Bridge Branch Railroad berm, and feeds that basin. The basin was originally fed from water from the canal, but now it's fed from that small stream, and then empties under the towpath and into Smith's Brook, and Smith's Brook empties into the Rockaway River.
Wow,
Good.
another piece of luck to keep that watered.
Margaret, does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I just wanted to add one little thing. When we first started the project, we got a phone call from the contractor and said, everything is flooding. And I'm like, it's never flooded for us before, but the beavers decided to dam up the
Oh,
outlet to the brook and caused all kinds of havoc. So
if you walk the area,
nature does get in the way sometimes.
if you walk the area, you see that it must be interesting to walk there at night because the beavers have a field day.
Hmm.
You can see where they actually have cut grooves going across the towpath berm, where they're dragging their stuff from one side to the other, building their homes and making their dams, and they're, I don't know, maybe your engineers and their engineers would have a nice.
Right.
The beavers definitely work cheaper.
Yeah, that's true.
But they're at it all the time. Every time I go back, I see, well, no, they're building another dam over here, or they're always doing something.
Well, we had trees marked on the site plan for removal and they had already done it for us.
Other thoughts or questions, folks? Anybody else, Jeff?
That's it for the questions, it seems.
Margaret, thank you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you. I'm not used to this format. I hope it wasn't boring. I just
I think this worked great. There are lots of positive
Okay.
comments in the chat here.
good. All right, excellent. All right. Well, we have to come back when it's done. We'll just do a 20-minute quick summary of pictures to show you all, and then maybe a site visit.
Margaret, thank you again.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
We had a wonderful attendance today, over 80 people, almost 90 people. And
Wow.
I think that everybody had a good time.
Great.
Whether or not they've actually visited the site, as it gets a little warmer, folk, go out and take a look. It's a wonderful, it has been a wonderful experience for me to watch this unfold from a pile of stones in an empty field to watching a lock come back out of the ground, and archaeology and gears and lock doors emerge, and then a whole lock tender's house arise from the pile of stones. So, and it's going to get better. So stay tuned, folks. And again, thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll be together again in March. Depending on what COVID does for us, we will definitely try to have a Zoom/in-person meeting, and possibly in the future we'll all be able to get together in person once again. So we thank you again for joining us and watch. Your newsletters are in the mail, by the way. So,
Mine came today.
oh, Beer says hers came today. A bunch have been going in every day. A couple of hundred go in the mail, and so the last batch went in the mail this morning. And some of you probably already have your newsletter. So watch your emails for other events, for the venue for the March meeting, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you.
Thank you. We will get this recording up to YouTube and share it on social media as soon as we can in a few days. Thanks again for joining, everybody.
Good night, everyone.